Made some tea. There's always time for tea in one of my beautiful Emma Bridgewater mugs. But now I've had tea and we've had a little bit of a walk around the garden. It is time to tell you something around the history of what country life called a baby castle, my home here in rural Wales. Now, this place certainly didn't start off life as a castle. It started probably as a barn, probably started as agricultural buildings. So this house and many of the other houses in the village were owned by the big house over the paddock, Llanfihangel Court. Absolutely beautiful, Jacobean, gorgeous, stately home. Like lots of stately homes at the time, they basically owned the village. And we know that in 1559, it was remodelled by a man called Rhys Morgan. However, the timbers in this house date back to 1421. So either there was a building here before that just wasn't recorded, and these timbers are part of that building from 1421, or it was original recycling and they took the timbers from somewhere else and built a barn here, because we know that the area out here, the area that Chaucer and I have just walked in, was originally an orchard, probably for apples, but mainly for cherries. In fact, the paddock just over the road, which is still part of Llanfihangel Court and was sold in the early 90s, used to be part of this building. I kind of still wish it was. That's an apple orchard. And according to maps of the early 1700s, this area here was a cherry orchard and known as Cherry Orchard. In fact, this house was known as Cherry Orchard, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm going to read from a document which is absolutely fascinating. It is from 1786 and it describes the big house Llanfihangel Court. And I think it starts making some reference to this property here. So on the screen, you'll see now the original beautiful script. But the transcription that I have here says, this mansion house called Llanfihangel Court, or Llanfihangel Court, a double L in Welsh, it's pronounced Cla, situation within 3 miles of Abergavenny and 2 of Hereford, is a strong built stone house with good offices, of all supplied with water by lead pipes, with stables, coach house, barns, malt house, cider mill and granary in good repair. Now this is the bit where I think they get to us. There are also about this house orchards of cherry and apple sufficient to produce 100 hogshead of cider, with a hop yard lately planted. So I think that's probably one of the first references to this land here. And this was probably an agricultural building. And it's not showing up in any records, but it would make sense if it was an agricultural building because it didn't pay any building tithes, which were payable if it was a residential building. So it could have been here as an agricultural building, not recorded, because guess what? There were no taxes on it. So the first time there is any real reference to a building here is in 1842. That's when it appeared on any tax paying and any census documentation. It was listed as the schoolhouse and was known as Cherry Tree or Cherry Tree House. And that would make sense because we know this was an orchard. And then in 1851 in the census, Mary Williams is listed as living here as the school mistress. And what's interesting, at the time, the Williams family owned the big house, so she may possibly have been a relative who was living here and running the school just a couple of fields away from her posher relatives in the big house. Now, local legend has it, and it is just legend, that while it was a school, a young boy died out there in the orchard. And my neighbours have seen a young boy sitting upstairs in the oldest part of the house. I'm going to take you up there quickly and show it to you because there's something absolutely fascinating in that room. Come along, let's go for a little bit of a wander. So if we go out of the Great Hall and make our way up the stairs, I saw a ghost on those stairs. I'm definitely going to talk to you about those. Come through. This is the oldest part of the house. We call it the Westonbirt room because we've got a picture there of Westonbirt Arboretum, which is where my husband was working when I met him. And that is the window that the boy sits at, and my neighbours across the road have seen him. But what I want to show you is this. So underneath that little cupboard there, if you pulled up the floorboards, you would see stairs that bring you down into the Great Hall. And this cupboard is where the original inhabitants would have slept. It is now used by us as an overflow wardrobe and for suitcases. But it would have been really warm. They would have climbed in at night, closed this behind them, and had a good night's sleep. I've never seen the boy. I have definitely heard things. And in fact, last night I was sitting watching Gardener's World, and Chaucer on the sofa was looking up and down, up and down, up and back, and he was literally watching something that I couldn't see going back and forth. So I did say, some of you sent me messages saying I should say this. If there's a spirit here, please go to the light. You are welcome here, but I invite you to go to the light. I have to say though, last night, it was quite a bumpy night here. Lots of noises, and this little one, oh, that's why he's sleeping today. He was up and down all night, pacing around the bedroom. So I don't know what happened last night. This is where Chaucer was looking at. So we were sitting on the sofa there, and he just kept looking back and forth the entire time, like there was something he was watching. So I've got no idea what was going on last night. Poor little man, he's a bit tired today. But I'm glad I got to show you the upstairs room there. That is the oldest part of the house, and there would be stairs just from there that would take you up to that original bedroom. We use it for guest accommodation, and as well as the turret. And it's something we won't be renting out as the Airbnb because I'm not sure people want to share a room with a ghost. Oh, however, if you really want to, give me a message below and you can come and stay. So let us go back to our history. So we've got so far up until 1851, and we know Mary is living here. Then in 1891, in the census, it's listed as an uninhabited house. So Mary had left. Another school appears to have opened up in the village. It was founded by the owners of Llanfihangel Court at the time, and this building just empty. But something is about to change all that. Oh yes, indeed. This is where it gets very exciting. In 1903, Llanfihangel Court was sold to a very grand couple. I'm going to have to read out their names. Benjamin and Florence Atwood Matthews. Now, unfortunately, Benjamin never made it. He died on a train journey and was taken out on the platform, passed away. But Florence, who's a fascinating character, moved here on her own and had the most incredible life over the rest of the 20 plus years that she lived here. But let me take you back to them before they moved to Llanfihangel Court. They lived just a couple of miles away in Hereford. He was actually the sheriff of Hereford. He stood in for the monarch, and they lived in a place called Pontrilas. They had a beautiful house there, very similar to Llanfihangel Court. I'm popping an image up here on the screen. And they were very well connected. In fact, Florence's younger sister Mary was the goddaughter of Henry James. And Henry seems to have been a visitor to Florence and Benjamin's home. Actually, they had form of doing up, poshing up, and making quite unusual architectural choices before they came here, and potentially did something with a turret in this building. So at Pontrilas, Henry James went to visit them, and he wrote them this amazing letter afterwards. And I'm going to pop it up on the screen here, but I'm going to read from it. I'm glad to hear of the embellishment of Pontrilas, complete as that establishment appears in my memory. It appears that she had really form on embellishing her properties. And then later on, an account of an estate agent, his life, he talks about how Mr. Bamford, the estate agent, would come down from Hereford once a month to Langva, Hangbrook or Corney and saw to all necessary repairs of the cottages, farms, etc. Under the terms of her late husband's will, Mrs. and then it's Arnold Matthews had to spend a stipulated sum each year on this matter. But instead of keeping each place in good repair or improvements made, she would allow the money to accumulate and then build on some addition to the house where it was neither desired or necessary, and several of these are to be seen in the village. It seems likely that she loved embellishing houses. It seemed likely that is a reference to her embellishing this house and building the tower. And why would she have done that? Well, not only was she a historian who absolutely loved Egypt and was quite a famous Egyptologist in her time, she also loved the Elizabethan era. And I'm popping on here a picture of her dressed up all fancy in Elizabethan outfit. So it wouldn't be unusual for her, because she had the money, to build a romantic Elizabethan turret. But why would she do that? Because she loved entertaining. There are records that she would have 3 or 4 dinner parties every week, often going on to past 10 o'clock. Oh my goodness, the scandal. And it is likely that she built the turret here as extra guest accommodation. Absolutely fascinating. Now, we use it as guest accommodation. I'm probably going to use it as an Airbnb accommodation later on this year once I get the stables up and running. But I love the fact that a powerful woman a couple of fields away who loved Elizabethan England owned this, once a barn, then a cottage, poshed it up into what would become a gentleman's residence and home for the local gentry because she loved Elizabethan history. Now, she definitely lived life to the full. She had many, many pugs. She kept lots of servants, and she used to spend an absolute fortune. In the time that between her husband died and her dying in 1924, about 21 years, she spent equivalent to £20 million in today's money. She had lots of very fancy servants. She also had a housekeeper who worked for Queen Victoria, and in her will there was listed a piano that was also once owned by Queen Victoria. I feel really connected to Florence, and I love the fact that she took her love of history, which I have too, and built something here that will stand the test of time. Now, when she died in 1924, the estate was sold, and this building was listed as a gentleman's residence. And I'm putting the sales particulars up on the screen for you here. But my goodness, the story does not stop there. In part 2, if you want, I can talk to you about the colonel who lived here and bought it in 1924. And then I can talk to you about the mine owner and his 9 children, I think the most famous of which is Gladys, who died here and who haunts this room and is buried under the cherry tree by the turret. During her lifetime, this became connected with prisoners of war, and I've got a copy of her will, and that tells you a lot about what it was like to live here at the time and what this turret looked like, and some other things around the garden. Honestly, I'll definitely read her will out to you. I'll tell you, she had some very good jewellery. So what do you think? Absolutely fascinating. The history of the turret. Now, what's interesting is this turret is listed by Cadw, which is the Welsh version of the National Trust, as Elizabethan. I never thought the turret was Elizabethan. It's far too modern. I thought it was probably Victorian, about 1870s, but it looks like it was built in the early 1900s on the whim of a history-obsessed, very rich woman just across the paddock. A woman who I would love to have for tea. And it's been glorious to have you here for tea today. Thank you so much for joining me. And particularly thank you to my members. The names are coming up here now. You really help me make this channel possible with your donations every month. I'm so grateful. And also, you know, if you're a Castle member, make sure you join Signal. And if you have any ideas what you'd like me to talk about in the next video, let me know. I'm really keen to share the story of Gladys, to talk a little bit more about the ghosts here, to give you an update on the stables, what's going on there. Let's just say paperwork is holding us up. But let me know, what do you want me to talk about? Because Chaucer and I, we really enjoy inviting you into our home. But for now, wherever you are and whoever you love, I wish you well, I wish you joy. Thank you for joining Chaucer and I today. Take care. Bye.